on session. So it would be best if you actually could open up a browser window, because we're going to have you set up your account in iClicker Cloud and set up a course in it. And the first thing you have to do, if you have, well, whether you created an account before or not with iClicker, you need to go to www.iclicker.com. So, or you can just type iClicker.com in your browser and you go there. If you have an account, log into it, or just use a sign-in link to sign in. If you do not have an account, click on create an account. If you already have created an account and have signed, once you signed in, you may want to download the iClicker software to your computer if it's a computer you're going to be using in class, or even if not, just to practice with. And that will give you the instructor's version of it. I did that right before, but I'll go show you the process. Click on download iClicker software. It's not essential to get connected, but it is going to be essential once you start using it, or to practice using it before your class starts. So you would choose iClicker Cloud, then download options, click on either Windows or Mac, whichever is appropriate. This is a Windows machine, so I clicked on that, and then scroll down and then choose the instructor standalone version. The campus admin, the IT version, is the one that's installed on desktop computers and podiums. And it is on, as far as I know, every desktop computer on campus, or every podium computer, not every desktop, but every podium computer in the classrooms. But the actual setup we're going to be doing is in this browser window in iCloud. So I'll give everyone a little bit of time. Does anyone have any questions while everyone's getting set up?
John, I have a quick question. I had set up a student account for myself the other day for the other workshop. Now, when I'm trying to set up the instructor one, it's telling me my email already exists.
Oh, yeah, basically for instructors, the student account uses the same ID and password. So
okay, so I don't have to create a new account then.
You don't have to create a new account. You should be able to log into the instructor account with that.
Okay.
I believe.
Thanks. I'll give it a try.
Okay. Any other questions? Has everyone created an account or is close to creating an account? This is easier when people are in person. Huh. Okay, you can type in chat or just turn your mics on. It worked. Okay, good. So, right, because you wouldn't see my course because you were enrolled as a, Lisa said that it worked, so she's able to get in. And my course would only appear if you log in as a student because you were enrolled in a student during the workshop the other day, which focused on how it looks to use this from a student perspective. Okay, well, we're recording this, but is anyone stuck on anything at this point? Okay, well, I'm going to log in right now, and I'm going to sign in as an instructor, which is what you do after your account's created. And we're going to go through the process, and you should do the same thing once your account's created. Log in, and this is how you would create any new course, by logging in here. And you could manage your account. Much of what you do, you can do from the app itself, which you could download. You could download the iClicker Cloud Instructor app on your smartphone, or on either iOS or Android, and you can use that to run polls and to do everything from there if you'd like, or to monitor it. But but some things you can only do from a browser window, and that's one of the things we're going to do now. Typing and trying to type a long password doesn't work so well for me anymore. Okay, and it worked. Okay, so I'm not going to save that password. Okay, so this was this is the account that was set up before. And once you log in as an instructor with your account created, the first thing you want to do is to set up the courses you're going to be using this spring. So I see there's a chat message. All set. Okay, well, let's go with that. And so just click on create a new course. And I'm actually going to be doing this for my own course here. I figured I'd double up on that, hoping I remember how to do it as we go. And you have two options here. One option is for attendance only. I generally not recommending doing that for a number of reasons. One is students don't necessarily see much benefit in connecting to an app and logging in just so that you can keep track of whether they're there or not. You can do that, but it's much more effective if you actually use it as a poll, if you use the polling features within it. So the advantage of attendance only is that if you have students who are only in your class, it doesn't cost the college anything. But if you do have students sign up and you set up a full course, it costs $4 per student. However, many students are going to be enrolled in other courses, and it's not $4 per student per course. If one student is using us in, say, 3 classes, it still only costs $4. When I was teaching a large intro class a couple of years ago, well, actually 3 years ago, before the pandemic started, about half of my freshman class were using the iClicker software. Actually, then it was the iClicker hardware in at least one other class, and about 15% of them were using it in 3 classes at the time, because a lot of large classes on campus do use it. So I'd encourage you to experiment with the full course. It doesn't cost your students anything. CTS is picking up the cost of this, and it's a really powerful tool. So the first thing to do is to put in the institution. That's pre-filled now from the email address, I think. If not, you may have had to do it when you set up your account. I'm going to put in, I'm doing an economics class. My course name is econometrics, so I'm going to put that in here. And the starting date is going to be 1/23, I believe. Yeah. Although I'm going to leave it for now, just so I can actually do it from here. And the ending date is going to be somewhere around what? Well, I'm just going to put in June 1st. It's sometime in May, but I don't feel like looking it up. Basically, you want to make sure it overlaps the beginning and starting dates of the semester. You probably want to leave it at students can search for and self-enroll in the course. And actually, they're going to be invited to the course directly within with the information from Brightspace. So much of that is going to be handled. The rest of this is optional, but I'm going to put it in anyway. It just makes it a little easier for students to see it. And I usually put the term in just to have it from my own records when I look back, because I've been doing this for 12 years and there's data from all those years. So this is spring 2023. This is optional too, but it just makes students feel a little bit better. My class is at 10:20, so I'm going to put that in. I suppose I could put 10:10 so they don't show up late, but they wouldn't pay attention to that anyway because they know when it's scheduled. So 10:20 and 10:20. It's only 2/3 as much work with the Tuesday, Thursday class. Okay, come on. Okay, so now once you have that, you create the course, and now it will be available for students to search for. The next thing you want to do is actually set up the requirements and connect it to Brightspace so you can automatically get grades in the gradebook and so forth. So select your course and then go over to settings. Okay, and these are the settings we're going to set up right here. Any questions, any problems? Everything working okay? Okay, well, let's go through it. And if you, Okay, so first thing to do is to set up devices. Now, I'm going to choose mobile devices only. There are physical clickers that students could buy, but there's two things that would have to happen for you to use it. Well, there's a number of things that would have to happen if you're going to allow the use of physical clickers, which used to be the only thing we had options for up until 3 years ago. And one is that you have to be in a classroom that has a clicker receiver. Another is that students would have to buy the clickers. And so instead of having the college pay $4 for the use of this, they'd have to pay roughly $20 to $25 for a used one, or about $45 for a new one. And also you're going to be limited in the types of response you have to only multiple choice questions. So if you want to take advantage of the full range of options, you probably want to only allow mobile devices. The only time when people would tend to use iClicker remotes is for those faculty who refuse to allow students to have mobile devices in their classrooms. There aren't too many left. I think there's only 1 or 2 on campus. And for them, students would have to buy the iClicker remote. But mobile devices is the most flexible, and pretty much all of our students have mobile devices. Okay. Now you can turn on the monitor student focus. It doesn't really work all that well. Basically, what happens is that it tells you how often they've left the app during the course, during your class period. But one thing that will happen is that you might ask students to use their mobile device for something else, or there might be some legitimate reason for them looking at it. And you can try it if you want. It'll give you a report about what proportion of the time students were out of focus, but I generally haven't used that. For attendance, you can choose to highlight students with 3 or more unexcused absence. That just shades them in the attendance thing. And generally, you probably don't want to require location for attendance, simply because location is set by, in some cases, by the wireless, by the connection they have to the wireless system. It's not always based on GPS coordinates, especially in terms of inside many of our buildings. So I generally don't require location. That means that students might be able to check in and appear to be attending, even if they're somewhere else connected to a wireless device, to a wireless network. If you want, you could require and set location, but then you'd have to have the GPS coordinates and all the rest. And it's probably not worth the extra effort of doing that. And from people who have tried it, it has broken down a bit in that some students who were in the room were reported as not attending because there was some problem in their location, and however their location was being measured. The most important things, though, are the remaining questions, particularly the polling and the integrations. Now, the next thing is, how are you going to share results with students? Do you want to let them know what the results were in terms of the breakdown of how many questions, whether they answered questions correctly, what proportion of students answered questions correctly, and so forth? And what I generally do is I don't send the results out, because generally students are in the class and I share the results with them and they do see the scores showing up and so forth. Oh, that's the class result. Oh, I'm sorry. I had scrolled down accidentally. Now, this is actually what I wanted to do. When it's send a picture of my screen to student devices. This is basically, I'm not sure if everyone knows how this works, but basically the way iClicker works, and most Clicker apps today work, is that you put your questions on the screen somehow. It could be in PowerPoint, it could be in Google Slides, it could be in Prezi, it could be in Beamer or any other. It could be in a Word document, it could be in Notepad. But basically, you put the question you're asking students on the screen somehow, and it will take a screen grab of that, and that becomes the question, which is stored. Now, I generally automatically send this to students so that if for some reason they can't see the screen very well, or for the students who are legitimately out of class, I generally just let them see it on their device. That's especially important if you do have some students connected remotely who are both viewing the class over Zoom on a mobile device while also being polled over a mobile device, because switching back and forth in the middle of a poll can be a little bit awkward or can take a little bit of time, especially if they're not used to switching back and forth. But you do have the option of either not sending it where they have to see it on the screen in the classroom, sending it only at the end of it, or automatically at the start. So I do it at the start, but I do not send, as I said, I skipped over that first question, but I don't send the results because one of the things I do, and I think some of you have heard this in past workshops, is I use a polling technique most often developed by Eric Mazur, where he'll ask a question, he'll look at the results himself, but he won't share the results with the students initially, but he'll have them, well, if somewhere between 40 and 70% of this class, or 35 and 70% roughly, gets the question correct, and the rest get it wrong, he'll have them talk to each other. He'll have them discuss it. There'll be some peer discussion going on, some peer instruction going on. And then he has them vote again, and that's when the results are displayed. If you set it up to for students to see the class results when the polling ends, they'll see what proportion of students picked each answer, and that makes it much harder for them to engage in that discussion or to learn from that. So I generally recommend not sending the results if you're going to use that technique, which has been demonstrated to be the most effective way of using clickers in terms of learning gains and in terms of knowledge retention. So that's how I set it up generally. The next thing is a question of how you're going to score it. And you have lots of options there. One way of getting a score is based on class participation. And some instructors just use participation only. So you could, for example, give them a point when at the end of the class period when they participated in a number of criteria. If one requirement might be the strict one, that they have to answer every single question that's asked. Another is all but one question, or at least 75% or 50%, or at least one. I generally don't use that because most of the questions I ask are ones where there are in fact correct answers, but that may vary with your class. If you just want to get students engaged in a discussion or having opinions or sharing opinions on something, if it's attitudinal or something similar, you might just want to only score participation. So if you want to score participation, this would be how many points would be given each day based on the criteria you specify. Okay, now I don't use this, so I just set this to a 0. But you could use a mix if you want some points that are just for being there and answering questions, and if you want some points that are there based on whether they answered questions correctly, then you could assign some points for just being there for the number of questions they answer, and you could add in this, where what I do is I give them 3 points. Many people do 2 and 2 or 3 and 3 or 1 and 1 or something like that. But I give students 3 points for just responding to the question, an additional 2 points for responding correctly. That's not an uncommon approach. What that means basically, if a student is there and they attempt every question and they get everyone wrong, they get a 60%, which would be, not a particularly high grade, but at least they're getting some points for it rather than getting 0 because they did attempt these things. And then, okay, there we go, because I was wondering why I was stuck at 4. And then they get the points for correct response is added to the points for just responding. So they get 5 points if they answer it correctly. They get 3 points if they answer it incorrectly. And I try to find questions where on average, somewhere around half the class will get it correct, so that it is challenging, so that it's not clearly obvious what the correct answer is, or so that students aren't struggling with all of them. But the goal is to get a mix of, using Eric Mazur's method, the goal is to get it so that you have challenging questions where the answers aren't obvious, where they have to engage in some transfer, taking concepts they've learned and applying them in a slightly different context or in a somewhat more complex environment than the basic questions they may work through when they're first working on it. And so if they get half of them correct, they end up with 80% for the day, which isn't a bad number if that's the average performance of the class. You can adjust it however you want. Now, one thing you can do is you could set a fixed total for the session and split the points among any number of graded questions. That's up to you. And I don't do that. But if, for example, you wanted every day's polling to be worth 10 points for the day, you could set it up so that if you answered 10 questions, each one would be 1 point if they answered it correctly. If you have 5 questions, each question would be worth 2 points. I just adjust the number of questions I ask will vary, partly based on whether they answer it, if most of the class answers it correctly on the first attempt or not. And you can do it, and that way you end up with equally weighted scores automatically. But on the other hand, Brightspace will do that anyway, so I don't worry about that. And this way they get to see what their percentage is for each class day when they look at the grade book, rather than seeing, well, they still see it that way. Either way, it's up to you. The next thing you have to choose is whether you're going to count up or count down. And if you choose a count up option, when you start a poll, it will start a timer and show you how long it's been going on. And you'll see, we'll look at that a little bit later, and you'll see how many people have responded. And then you manually have to stop the poll. I normally use a countdown, and normally for the first class or two, at least, I'll leave it at 1 minute and 30 seconds. That generally is enough, at least in my experience, for students to be able to open the app, connect to Wi-Fi if they haven't already done it, and all respond. Generally, what will happen is after I've done this for a few classes, especially if it's a class of like 40 or less, I'll generally bump it down to maybe 1 minute and 15 seconds, sometimes, or a minute. Yeah, I think 1 minute and 15 is the next increment, and sometimes even dropping down to 1 minute if the class is just really quick at responding. However, if I'm giving them more complicated problems to work through and say it's a numeric response or something similar, I generally give them time to work through the problem before I start the polling, and I just can see whether they finished, or ask them, are you ready for the poll to start? But the countdown timer for me just seems to work a little bit easier, because I'm not the one cutting them off and telling them they can't submit it unless they do it right then. And the countdown gives them a nice visual cue. It'll turn yellow and then red as it approaches the counter on the screen. As it approaches 0, will become obvious that they need to get the response in. And I'll usually remind them too that, especially the first few times that the poll's about to end. So that's the basic setup for that. The next thing is quizzing, and this is up to you. With quizzes, basically, this is where you can create a quiz, and instead of doing it synchronously, you can have students do it asynchronously. Some people, if they're teaching high flex, might do this, where there's some classes, some questions they do synchronously, and then they assign all those questions later for an asynchronous quiz, so students can connect to it and do it at a later time. I don't do that, so I generally don't worry about that. But if you're thinking about doing it, you could. On the other hand, if you're going to use a quiz, you've got a whole lot more flexibility and power within Brightspace to do that. So if I'm going to give quizzes that are not synchronous, I just put it in Brightspace directly. And this is a part where you connect it to Brightspace. Okay, and what we have to do here, and I may run into a problem here, you should not. The reason I may run into a problem is I had to log into this Zoom session with a CELT account, which is not configured to work with Brightspace. When I tried logging in, I had a problem. So I'm going to try it. You should be able to do that, connect to Brightspace and go to Brightspace, and it should all work really nicely for you. I may get a problem right here, and I did. Would anyone be willing to share the screen if they're at this stage?
I would be, but I actually also just successfully did it.
Oh, you did? Okay, great. Well, then that's fine.
Okay.
Is anyone else at this stage and is willing to share?
I am, but it's showing not my current 2023 courses.
Oh, well, try it. Try sharing, and then I think we should work through that. there should be an option to display classes that are not yet active. Okay, click. So one issue is you'll only see your spring classes available if you publish them, if they're open to students. But if you look at the top, click on unpublished, and you'll see this semester's courses if you haven't yet opened them. So now, if you'd like to try this in one of your classes, just click on.
Is it because one of mine's already open, the one that I wanted to use?
If it's already open, then go back to the published one. Huh. You've got a lot of classes in there.
Yeah, I know.
There should be another 2023 in there.
Oh, there
There,
it is.
okay. So yeah, so just click on that and choose next. And now you'll have to, I believe, well, try connecting it. And now it's connected, and now click on sync roster. You won't have any gray data, so if anything displays, it won't be FERPA issues. And so what happens now is here you can see that if you're doing this for the first time, 14 of your students have already used iClicker in some other class. Many of them probably were in mine because a lot of, HPW students take intro economics. So over half of your class already has an account, and 8 students need to. And if you click view details, it will give you a list of the students that they need to do it. And I don't think that would be a problem if you click on it. But even if you don't, if you do this on your own, you can always view the details, and then you have an option of inviting them to the class, and it gives them a link for them to create their own accounts, tells them how they can download the app, and so forth. And so you are now connected. Your class is already set up, and all you have to do is go to your class and use it. You could. Well, actually, you don't do it from there. You do it from within Brightspace. So what you would do actually is you would, within iClicker. Do you have iClicker installed on your laptop? Okay. Well, I can demonstrate it from here, I think. So, okay. So is that working for everyone? Were you all able to connect to your class? Okay. Anyone else? Any problems?
I wasn't.
Well, what happened?
No, I'm all lost now. I got this error message. Valid request. Why is that too early? Everything is going fine.
Yeah, Brightspace seems to be really, really slow, and that's really concerning because the students aren't yet all back, or at least not here. So it was deadly slow last night and yesterday. But I'm hoping that'll be better soon. Okay, well, so now what I'm going to do is I'll show you how to actually run a session. And if you'd like to participate just to see what it looks like from the student, actually, can I do it? No, I can't. Okay, well, I can show you how to use the app itself. So I'm going to share the screen again. And once you have installed it on your computer, or you're in a classroom, you would, in Podium computers, you're going to see it right on the desktop, but this one is not a typical Podium computer. So I'm going to go down to iClicker, iClicker Cloud. And if you click on that link, it'll load in and install it. And that's what it's doing right here. And now it is going to, you'll see this in the classroom or on your own computer. And I just downloaded this an hour ago, and there's an update apparently. So I'm not going to, I'm going to skip this version for now because I just installed the thing. And what will happen is I have to log in. This is the app now I'm using, and this is what you'd see in the classroom. And you'd normally set this up right before your class starts. So I'm going to log in.
John, are you downloading the iCloud?
I did. So the iClicker Cloud. iClicker Classic is the one that's used with the old devices and the old receivers. But no matter, that no longer works and is no longer active at Oswego. It wouldn't allow you to connect to Brightspace. You have to download iClicker Cloud if you're going to use it. And that is, because even if students are using physical clickers, that still works. It still works with them. And the old system, the iClicker Cloud, would, what was I going to say? You used to have to download that, store it on a USB drive, bring it to your classroom, remove it and take it out at the end of class, and all your data was on there. And if it gets corrupted, it's a real pain trying to retrieve that data. So this is nice because all the grades are stored in the cloud and so forth. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to actually run the class through iClicker. Run my class, because it will show students as being absent once I've set it up. I'm going to run this other one I set up just for the workshop. And once you choose your class, this is what pops up. And it's right under this display bar here. And let me move this bar. So I can't access it right now. Unless I move it to the bottom. There we go. You get this on the screen. If it's not if it's your own computer, it's going to be about a quarter of this size. But this is the size that shows up on the resolution set on Podium computers. Once you start the class, you can minimize it, move it wherever you want. It will be on top of whatever you're using. So if you're using PowerPoint, just move it to a point on your slides where it's not covering text. If there's some text appears there, just move it somewhere else. When you're ready to do a poll, let's say we have, let me see. Let's suppose we're going to do a poll, and imagine there's a question on the screen here. There isn't, and I should have probably loaded some. But what I'm going to do here is just do a quick poll, and you do it by clicking on that. Then you get to choose the type of question you're going to ask. By default, it starts with multiple choice, and it will stay at whatever your last selected option was the next time you use it. Multiple choice is probably what most people do, but you could also use short answer where students can enter a text response. You probably don't want to have them write a paragraph because they're going to be doing it on their smartphones. I'm not sure what the limit is, but if you just want people to write a sentence or two or a few words, use short answer. Numeric will accept only numeric input. Target is used if you want to be able to, if you have an image on the screen and you want people to click on a particular part on their device as their answer. Multiple answer is what in Brightspace and Blackboard was called multiple select, where you could have more than one correct answer and they can pick multiple answers. So let's just imagine we're doing a multiple choice thing. We will start the poll. And it asks which display, because there is a projector here. So I'm just going to, it doesn't matter which one I select, and it's going to capture the desktop. And if you were logged into the class, you would see that pop up on your screen. And because this class was not set as a countdown, it's counting up. So I hadn't set the other one up to allow a countdown because I didn't know how long it would take for everything to work during the workshop. And if people were joining here and were answering, you'd see the number of responses count up and until, you know, all the responses are in. If you find that you didn't allow enough time or students are anxious because they're having trouble connecting to the network, you always have the option, if you're using a countdown, of increasing a time. Because we're using a count up, that doesn't appear, but you could expand the time if it's taking students longer for whatever reason. And they'll tell you if they're having a problem connecting to it. And sometimes they do, but usually that doesn't last for more than the first day or two. And then when you stop it, you could click on results and you'd see a nice little bar chart of the responses there. If it is well, because there are no responses here, that won't happen. Although actually, Lisa, you are logged into the class if you want to go in as a student. So yes. Oops. The chat. I thought I saw.
I had a different question, although I can try to go into the class and answer the question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
When you clicked to show the results, would all, because if we just set it up that we don't want to share the results with the students,
yes,
when you click on the results, would you have to like, is that going to go to their phones, or do you have to like,
if you're using a typical classroom setup where there's only one computer that going to the projector, what would happen is it would show up on the screen and they'd all see it. And that's a really good question. So if you don't want to show the results to them, there's there's a few ways of doing it. One is if you have two monitors, you just drag the results over to the other monitor and you can watch the results as they come in. When I'm teaching in Lanigan 101, there is a second monitor. So I will open the results screen and it's detachable and I move it to the other screen so I can see the results as they're responding. And then I can drag it back over to display to students at a stage when I'm ready to. In most classrooms, though, that doesn't work, but there is an iClicker instructor app, which will connect to the same session that you're running on the computer. And what you can do there is you can view the results on that screen without sharing it with the students. Does that make sense? So you just log in the same way. You'd log into the class as an instructor, and you'd basically be connected to the class both from your smartphone or tablet and from the podium computer. And you can have the results being displayed on one of those without displaying on the others until you're ready.
Okay, thanks.
And the only problem is if you don't keep that app open, you have to disconnect and reconnect it because some or connections drop and so forth in campuses. But it does work, and I have done it that way. But the other thing I've done is I have a small portable monitor I bring in just because I like to be able to keep it open all the time. But yes, so you can run it from more than one device. So at least you can do it between a mobile device and a desktop. I don't know if you'd be able to run two instances on two different laptops or, but I have done it from both an iPad and an iPhone and been able to do it. And that also gives you the option, if you're in a bigger classroom, of starting and stopping the polling without going to the podium. So you could actually use your mobile device to start and stop the questions if you're in the back of a big room without having to run up to the front of it. And up until I broke my leg this past fall, I was able to do that when I was in the large classroom. So I didn't need to go to the podium much at all, because it also includes the ability to page forward or backwards within your slides directly from your mobile device, as well as starting and stopping the polls and displaying them and choosing whether to display them on the desktop. So yeah, it's a little more awkward than it used to be. One advantage of the old iClicker was that there was a physical receiver that would show you the number of responses for each of the multiple choice questions. But on the other hand, you also lost the ability to, you wouldn't have the ability to do multiple select, you wouldn't have the ability to do the image mapping, and you wouldn't have the ability to get the free responses or the numeric questions that way. So it limited you only to multiple choice questioning, and there's a lot of power in having that variety of questions. One thing that we can't do without multiple, well, actually, Lisa, were you able to connect to it?
It wasn't. Now when I go in, the only class that says I'm in is the one that I just created.
Oh, well, yeah, if you go in as a student, though, on the mobile app or on the app, you'd have to log in as a student in a different browser.
Oh, okay.
And if you came in as a student, that cell class would still be there. It expires at the end of the day today, I believe. But I just set it up for this workshop. But then you'd be able to respond to the questions. People could see how it works. Does anyone have any questions? Is everything working? Were you able to set it up and so forth?
Oh. Shoot, I went away from it too quickly. It did say my instructor started a poll.
Okay, well, that poll ended, but we can start a new poll. So we can start, let's give you the option of doing a short answer. And I'll start it right now, and you can type in anything you want. How's the weather today or something? And basically, that way we could at least see how the results look. If you do that. There we go. We have a response. We'll stop the polling. We can look at the results. And I think we all miss the sun. And what would happen is if you had 400 students, they'd all be listed there, for example. And I have had up to 400 students, well, up to I think 380 was the most I've had use this. And you have the option with text responses of generating a word cloud. It's not going to be a very complete word cloud here, but it will show you the frequency of responses if you're using it in a larger group. You know, so you could ask students to state their mood for the day, or any concerns they have about the class, or what they're struggling with, or what's working really well. And the size of the word will indicate how frequently it appears. So you can get a really quick visual impact without having to look at all of them. And later you can look at the results and read all the responses or skim through all the responses.
You sit with a completely asynchronous course, like if you were.
I have not, and I probably wouldn't, because the real power of this is the ability to ask questions in real time, because these are the only questions you can ask, and you don't have the ability to do random selection of questions and other things. In Brightspace, you can have question pools, so students don't all get the same question. It makes there's a lot of ways in which you can use things asynchronously or remotely, well, asynchronously with reducing the likelihood of academic integrity issues. Because if you give a quiz for a class of say 200, well, even 30 or 40 students, and everyone gets the same question and they're working online, those questions are going to appear on Chegg or in a class chat that the students have set up with all the answers really, really quickly. And then you see, you know, a lot of people getting perfect scores, except those who don't realize that they could use those workarounds to avoid actually learning the stuff. And unfortunately, I'm speaking from experience with that, because I've had to redo at one point about 3,000 questions one semester that ended up being all on Chegg very rapidly. So I would use Brightspace's tools rather than using this for asynchronous work. It's possible, but the tools in Brightspace are so much more powerful. Plus, grading is a bit easier too there. So, what would happen? Any other questions? Well, actually, one other thing, just to demonstrate the image map, because that's something most people probably haven't used before. I'm going to ask you a question, Lisa, and maybe you could click on D2L on the screen just to show how it works. So if you had a map of the US or a map of the world, or if you were teaching an art class or a photography class, and you wanted to illustrate some particular use of lighting or something, or color or contrast, you could do that. So just click somewhere on your screen. If you're using a desktop with a mouse, if it's on a smartphone, just press the screen somewhere. And the answer should be somewhere around here.
Okay, and then I have to click send to.
Yes, yeah, just touch the screen there and then click send. Okay, so we'll stop the polling. And what you would get back is whatever image was on the screen with a place where the answer is. And actually the answer was up here, so that would be flagged wrong, but I'm going to mark it correct anyway. And what would happen as the instructor is you get to choose a rectangle that encompasses the correct answer. Now, if you try doing this with like 300 students, there's going to be a lot of dots, but you can highlight where a reasonable boundary would be around the area. And the people who are within that boundary would get full credit. The others would get the points for responding, but not the points for a correct answer. And then you just click on it and you've got it. So I'm going to save that. And that would be the response where there's one question, one person correct, no one was incorrect, and then closing the results, take it away. Okay. And basically you just have to remember, if you're switching question types, just to change this. If you're doing only multiple choice, it's easy. You just leave it there and so forth. If you're only doing numeric, you just leave it there and it will stay there for the next questions. And when you're all done, you would click right here and you would click end. And you get the option of either ending with an exit poll or not ending with the exit poll, or saying, oh, I didn't mean to exit, but we're going to end here and just say end. And then what will happen is you just close this and go back to your back to your office, and then you can log in and can I do that from here? Yeah, I should be able to do it. So I'm going to go over here. I am logged in, and yeah, I did sign out. So I actually just signed out. I'm forgetting something. Okay, so now when I log in, it will show me my courses. And now here, if I click on this, it will show me the attendance. We had, the last time we did this was Wednesday, and here are the results from that, and it will show me all the people who participated. We'll look at today. Well, we can look at this one. What would happen is if it's connected to Brightspace, you would have the ability to sync the grade. Because this isn't connected to the gradebook, it won't give me the option, but it will show me how the responses were and so forth. Well, and I go to the gradebook to see that. And this would show me the people who participated in the poll, whether they got them correct or not. I don't think this is a Ferber violation, because these were all made up questions and people were just randomly guessing things, but it will show you the scores and so forth. And because this is not connected to Brightspace, you could export the results into a spreadsheet and upload them if you want to use them separately. If it's connected to Brightspace, you'd have options to sync with the gradebook, which you would do first, which would add any students that added the class since it was first set up to the roster, and then it would remove any students who dropped it. It would give you an update saying this many new students were added. These students have not yet joined the class. Do you want to send them a reminder? It will then send them a reminder automatically, and it will say these students have dropped. Do you want to remove them from your gradebook? Say yes, and it keeps the gradebook up to date as you go. And then you'd have the option of syncing. You would choose which column. But the first time you do it, you would be asked whether you want to create a single column for your grades or whether you want to have each day's instance as a separate column. My recommendation is to do each day's instance as a separate column, simply because that way students entering into Brightspace can see how they did on each day. They can see which days they missed. They can see which days they were having problems. If there's just a total column, it only shows them the total score over the whole semester. So I would recommend using, again, separate columns each day. It will automatically create that column. It will call it session 1, session 2, session 3 as you move forward. And it will also have a subtitle, which would be the date of that. And then students can see which days they did well, which days they missed, which days they did poorly. And it's also kind of nice for us to be able to see which students were missing, which days they missed and so forth, because it's kind of automatically keeping attendance as part of it, even if it's not using the attendance column. And the only thing you have to is in Brightspace is at the start of the course, create a category of grades, which I typically call iClicker polling scores. And then each day scores, you have to edit the column and add it to that gradebook category and have that category assigned whatever weight. Typically, I assign a weight of like 10% or so for clicker scores as part of the overall grade. And then as long as you upload it, go into Brightspace, assign that gradebook column to the category, it gets averaged in with all the other scores. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, well, either ask now or just contact me or anyone else who uses iClicker.
Thanks, John.
Yes.
I said thanks.
Oh, thanks. Any questions, anyone? Okay, if you need any help, let me know. I've been using this for a long time and it's worked really well for me. Students like it. I like it. It's kind of nice. Okay, I'll stop the session then.